You know, a lot of people got this wrong earlier today when they heard about Rand Paul's opposition to the Republican repeal efforts, the Obamacare, the health care law, the so-called Affordable Care Act, that he was against upending this thing. He's still very much against doing so. What he's opposed to is the way Republicans are going about it. Kentucky's Republican Senator, former presidential candidate Rand Paul, with us now. Senator, good to have you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. That was the fake news that says I wasn't for repealing Obamacare. The real news is, yes, I am for repealing Obamacare, but I think we ought to also have a budget that represents conservative values and that also balances. I'm just upset that the Republicans have put forward a budget that never balances and would add $9.7 trillion to the debt over 10 years.
No, it makes sense, and I understand where you're coming from, but the way it's been explained to me by others, including Congressman Scalise, the House Majority Leader, is that this is the mechanism, the swiftest way to do it. I'm paraphrasing, but that is the gist of it. Speaker Paul Ryan saying much the same thing you say.
Sure it is, but it doesn't have to be a crummy mechanism. We could use a good mechanism. I'm going to introduce an amendment, I already have, that will replace the budget, repeal Obamacare, and my budget balances in 5 years, because that's what we should stand for, balancing the budget.
All right. So as things stand right now, you know, when you look at the numbers, Senator, there's not a lot of wiggle room for Republicans in the Senate on this particular matter. 52 Republicans, 48 Democrats, if we just go by the traditional math. So now it's down to 51. A couple of other Republicans could follow you, and all of a sudden this doesn't happen. They come back to you and say, Rand Paul killed our effort to kill Obamacare. You say what?
Well, I would say, why don't we pass a budget that balances in the foreseeable future and repeal Obamacare? You know, they're not mutually exclusive. If they came to me and they couldn't pass it, guess what? They would have to negotiate with conservatives, and instead of the establishment always get what they want, conservatives would have a say. So I talked to the House Freedom Caucus today, and I told them the same thing. Let's band together and say enough's enough. You know, here's what gets me. When I was watching politics before I was up here, I watched Republicans double the debt under George W. Bush from $5 trillion to $10 trillion. Then I watched the Democrats double it again from 10 to 20. But now I see Republicans putting forward something that'll add another $10 trillion to the deficit. It just makes my blood boil, and someone's got to stand up and say enough's enough.
As you know, Senators Mike Lee of Utah, Marco Rubio of Florida, Ted Cruz of Texas are all going along with this, saying that our votes in favor of the Obamacare repeal resolution do not indicate in any way our support for the revenue and deficit numbers therein, nor the use of those numbers as the basis for future federal budgets. Do you believe them?
Well, I guess I'm a literalist. When I vote for a budget, I think that's what I'm voting for. And in fact, everybody wants to say, oh, no, this is the vehicle to repeal Obamacare. But that's not the title of the bill. I held up the bill on the Senate floor yesterday. It says the concurrent resolution for the budget of 2017. We passed specific rules on the budget that says through reconciliation you can do special things, but you have to pass a budget. So this is a budget we are passing. It has real numbers, and these numbers do have consequence. These numbers are distributed to the committees, and these are the numbers that the committees make their decisions on how much they will spend. I think we should be bigger than this. We should be for something. We should be conservatives. If we are not the conservative party, who is the conservative party?
Now, you also said earlier that it would be a huge mistake for Republicans if we don't vote for a replacement the same day as the repeal. But that's a lot easier said than done. So would you be comfortable, or could you be comfortable with delaying this for conceivably quite a while if that were the case?
I don't think we have to delay it at all. There's at least 50 replacement bills out there. I'm going to be putting the best of the replacement bills together into one bill next week, and I'll have the legislative language done by next week, and I'll have it prepared. But you have to replace it on the same day, because if not, all of the unraveling, the further unraveling of Obamacare will be placed on the repealers. And I want no part of the blame for the further unraveling of Obamacare. It's a terrible system. It's causing the bankruptcy of insurers as large as North Carolina Blue Cross lost $400 million last year. But if you partially repeal Obamacare and leave in place some of the mandates, I think what you end up with is further unraveling of the insurance industry, and I want no part of that. I want a replacement to be out there to help people get insurance, to help them save for their insurance, and to help individuals become part of big, large insurance pools so they can have leverage, cheaper prices, and less risk.
Do you think it was a mistake, Senator, for Republicans to make this their kickoff issue? Should they have come up with something else?
No, really. I think we should have started out with a good budget, one that balances in the foreseeable future, and repeal of Obamacare and replacement. But there's no reason. We've been griping about Obamacare for 6 years. There's no reason we shouldn't have a replacement. And in fact, we do. There are hundreds of bills. I sat down with Congressman Tom Price today. He's got 24 bills himself about replacement. Let's take some of those good ideas, put them into a bill. Many of them are already in the legislative language that are needed to become a bill.
No, you raise a good point. I mean, people always assume that Republicans are good at ripping up, but they don't have alternatives. There are, to your point, plenty of alternatives out there. But let me step back and get your take about the fallout from all of this. Have you raised any of these objections, or did you or your staff give a heads up to the president-elect that you were going to do this?
I've been talking with the leadership of both House and Senate. I've been talking to my caucus for weeks on this, saying we should replace the same day we repeal.
What about Donald Trump? Was it raised, or did you raise it with him?
Well, you know, I don't talk to him on a daily basis, but I have talked to members of the administration. They know where I stand. They know that I'm a fiscal conservative, and that to me the debt is the most important pressing problem of our country, and that I can't give up on believing that the debt's a problem simply to repeal Obamacare. And that if you ask me which is a bigger problem, the $20 trillion debt that we face or Obamacare, as much as I hate Obamacare, as much as a physician I'll do anything to repeal it, I think the debt's a bigger problem.
Does that extend as well, Senator, to Donald Trump's interest in a big infrastructure package that could be upwards of $1 trillion?
I think there are ways to do it without adding to the debt. I have one proposal that would take the American profit overseas, let it come home voluntarily at a low tax, but put that revenue into an infrastructure fund.
Right.
So I think there are ways you could fund it without adding to the debt.
The same with tax cuts. Would you be agreeing with your colleague in Kentucky, the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, to make sure they are revenue neutral?
No, I'm for cutting taxes. I want government to be smaller. I want its revenue to be less. But that means I want every American to have more and to take home more of their hard-earned pay. But I would shrink government. I would cut the cost, the size and scope of government, but I would also cut taxes. And I think if you do cut taxes and shrink government, you'll see growth in this country like you've never seen before.
Senator Rand Paul, thank you. Very good catching up with you.
Thanks, Neil.
Senator Rand Paul. All right, we'll see how much sway that has in moving any other Republicans here. But again, there's not a lot of wiggle room, certainly in the Senate. In the meantime,